Well, Sasha, I do buckaroos. How the heck are you? I'm a couple of minutes behind trying to get everything together here. Anyways, I digress. Get something figured out here real quick, and I'll be right with you. Nope, it's not working yet. Anyway, so let's try it again. Hmm. Anyways, how the heck I am Tom, the Whiskey Whisperer. For the purpose of this video, anyway, we're gonna do a classic, well, very close to a classic Manhattan. Anyway, I am using Maker's Mark French Oak, Maker's Mark number 46 French Oak, and I'm using cherry bitters, and I'm using sweet vermouth, so it's very close to a classic. And it's launching. Oh man, that's gorgeous. I like the 46 because again, the French oak gives you much more vanilla than your typical makers. And again, it's at 94 proof, I believe it says here. Yeah, it takes it to a whole other level than your standard makers. Not sure why that's not working, but anyway. Anyways, let's launch it. Yeah, that's gorgeous. Wow. So I did a video earlier today with well the Lager Room guys, but today was the Anda Chaser show. That was always a lot of fun. And their alcohol of choice today, gravy, Mabel. Their alcohol of choice today was tequila. I used agave spirit, which means I used tequila, but it was but it was made here, man. So yeah, so they kept me a little slack, but I always try to. Always try to go local whenever possible. I'm not sure why this isn't working. It's we're frustrated me at the moment. Hmm. I don't know. Anyways, I'll just keep talking. I'm not sure why that's not working. Anyway, man, that's brilliant. The Manhattan is my favorite cocktail. It isn't necessarily one for this time of year, but sometimes it depends on what you're using for that product, right? It does seem more like a fall cocktail to me, the Manhattan, but it doesn't have the sweetness that the old fashioned has. So that's why I typically prefer the Manhattan to the old fashioned. Just can't figure out why that's not working. It's really bugging, man. Oh, good lord. Anyways, cheese biscuits. And we're back. Oh, there we go. That had to go a long way around the barn to make that work, but nevertheless, here we are. Wow, that was brutal. Anyways, okay, now you have my undivided attention. I can't figure out why that had to re-sign into every account to get that to work for some reason. That was really weird, man. Anyways, but I digress. Man. Classic Manhattan using the Maker's 46. Maker's number 46, maybe I should add. This is their French oaked version of. They've changed the label. Man. So my wife picked this up for me. I had her buy this one because this is the last of the old label. Anyway, I digress. Fuck nuggets. Once there was a way. As much as I would like to talk about certain things, I'm not going to get into them at the moment. Because I used my Monday video to talk about politics. I'm going to let the rest of it go for this particular moment in time, as much as I really love to delve into some things. Mercy, things are crazy. You know, folks like to say things like things are never more divided than the way they are now. And you kind of think that makes sense until you realize, well, it wasn't all that long ago when you had folks using separate drinking fountains, right? Folks that had to sit at the back of the bus. So things have been more divided than the way they are now. But it's all in how you want to interpret that, right? Things have been more divided. And you have that certain segment of society that wants to bring us back to that. But like I said, I'm not going to get into those politics. But I like to think of it as social issues, but sometimes, well, it seems like now social issues have become political issues. They didn't used to be one and the same, but they seem to be now, man. And we just want to have a cocktail and relax, man. So we're cranking out some tunes. I want to talk to you about a song I found recently. John Mayall just passed away. That's a big bummer for anybody that loves blues, or he was really the first big British or English performer to really turn out the blues rock. And I do know initially that a lot of traditional blues artists like Muddy Waters and were very critical of English blues artists initially. Howlin' Wolf, BB King, but you have to give them credit where credit is due. They really helped bring the blues to the mainstream. Artists like John Mayall, and of course you had the Yardbirds that did their thing. Yeah, those guitarists in the Yardbirds, right? You had Eric Clapton, you had Jeff Beck. Oh man, those guys were amazing. It was just a different time. I would have loved to been around back then when things were just exploding. Most of what became rock started from the blues, and then you had the prog rock, which there was some arguing about. But from my point of view, most of that came from classical music. You had classically trained musicians that took what they knew and turned it into rock and roll at the time, and that became the early prog. Right? You had bands like Yes. the Moody Blues. Yeah, I include the Moody Blues in there because they were doing things with orchestras that nobody else was doing at the time. That was quite a change. Rush became a prog rock act, but I don't know that they started out as one. I mean, their first album was very blues oriented, and their sound changed over the years. A lot of that, oddly enough, came about because of a change in drummer. You would think a change in something else, but no, the drummer change made them more of a prog rock act. But their first album was really more blues oriented. A lot of folks don't realize that. But you had that early prog rock. Again, I would say yes. Moody Blues. A lot of folks don't give Moody Blues the credit, but then you had the Days of Future Past album that was done with an orchestra. Nobody had done that before in rock and roll, and they did. Songs like Nights in White Satin, Tuesday Afternoon. We can argue all day about is that really prog, but I really believe it was. But most of early rock and roll was based on the blues. And then you had, Van Halen kind of changed the game in 1978 with a lot of different, well, there were elements of classical playing in Eddie's playing for sure. But then you had elements of blues in the way that David Lee Roth wrote the songs. So that you had those strange worlds colliding, right? And you got into the 80s, you had bands like Saga that folks wanted to label a new wave, but they were really more of that prog line. You had that new wave in prog, or earlier you had bands with elements of blues in prog. Well, here you had new wave in prog. And then throughout it all, you still had Rush that seemed to be the mainstay, right? I saw in 1980, might have been early 81, on the Moving Pictures tour when my friends and I went to see Rush in concert at the Anaheim Convention Center. And the opening act was a Canadian band called FM. And these guys were just insane, man. I mean, they were almost the bass player was on keyboards. It was just it was almost a carbon copy of Rush. I thought this band was going to be huge. I mean, after the next day, I went out and bought the albums that they had available in the States because I thought this band was that good, and they were never heard from it. Yeah, right. In fact, their lead guitar player Ben Mink went on to join UK, which was another band that didn't really get any traction here in the US. Right? UK was another kind of classically trained band that had that prog sound, I guess. Yeah, I mean, UK that shit was just insane, right? It was almost more of a mix of rather where a lot of prog is classical and becoming rock, whereas UK was almost more like jazz, right? Jazz mixed with classical and then became rock, and it was man, those guys were insane. But the guitarist from FM, Ben Mink, went over to there, and FM sort of faded away. But UK didn't go far either. The big player in UK, John Wetton from King Crimson, again early prog, then to UK, went on to form Asia, which was basically pop. You had all these great prog artists to form this band called Asia, which you thought might be the best prog band ever, and they were just basically top 40. I mean, they were good, don't get me wrong, but there was nothing really spectacular. And all these on the edge musicians said, okay, let's just do something mainstream for once. It was rather bizarre, but nevertheless, there they were. Hey, Jason, how are you, man? I just saw your comment. I'm going to put it on the screen there. I hope you're doing all right, my friend. National Tequila Day. Yeah, I did a video earlier with some friends for National Tequila Day. Anyways, I digress. I digress, man. I hope you're doing all right, my friend. Or stretching my legs about some music there, but anyway, yeah, you know. I think it all comes under the category of doesn't really matter, right? It doesn't really matter what category they're under, Tom. No, it really doesn't. I think it only matters um, a certain few that I think it matters what category. But album sales and what bands do you like? I don't know, man. I don't know that any of it matters much, to be honest with you. It all comes up in conversation from time to time. I mean, I got into a rather, it didn't start out that way, but I got into a rather serious discussion a while back with some folks about, Nirvana and their, what they added to the conversation. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not a fan. I think they were rather overrated. I think if Cobain did not buy the farm, we wouldn't be talking about it. I think if the band had the ability to run their natural course, they would be a mere footnote in the talk. But because he bought the farm, he becomes much more important than their band really was. But I got into a conversation with someone a while back who took that rather personally, like I was, insulting his mother. So wait a minute, why are you getting that upset about a rather benign conversation? Yeah, I'm not a fan of Nirvana, nor was I a fan of Metallica. I think Metallica played three chords really fast, very nice, and that's all they did. And they were a one-trick pony, and some people just took that trick a little more seriously than it should have been. That's my personal thoughts on that. And whether I'm right or wrong, well, it doesn't matter. And I think that's the conversation, right? None of it matters. People sell the albums, the bands sell the albums that they're going to sell. People buy the albums they're going to buy. They're going to listen to the music they're going to listen to. Any conversation we have on it is irrelevant. And there's no point getting mad at somebody because we disagree over which band was great and which wasn't. I don't understand why some folks take this shit so freaking seriously, because these are benign conversations that have no impact on society whatsoever. We all have opinions. There are certain bands I think were great, certain bands I think weren't. And the main thing is, Muddy Waters started it all. It's all about the muddy, man. When Muddy Waters electrified the blues in Chicago, it was all over, man. Elvis Presley was a product of his society. I mean, he's highly overrated, and he stole shit from everybody. Elvis Presley wasn't a great talent. He shouldn't be considered a great talent. But then you go, I say things like that, and that's going to ignite some shit. Because it all started from Muddy Waters. Muddy Waters doing what he did started everything else. So if you're not giving credit to the Muddy, then I don't care what else you have to say. And for my money, Buddy Holly did more for rock and roll than Elvis Presley ever did. So did Little Richard. So did Chuck Berry. All those folks added more to the story of rock and roll than Elvis Presley ever did. Elvis Presley was a hell of a showman. It wasn't a great writer because he stole songs from everybody. but he was a heck of a performer, by golly. He knew how to work the system. The great performers or the great artists out there were Buddy Holly, were Little Richard, were Chuck Berry, and then it all goes back to the great Muddy Waters. If you're not giving Muddy the credit, well, then you're an asshole and you don't understand how things work in the first place. Anyway, anyways, I digress. Now that I'm trying to piss off everybody, which is kind of what I try to do, to be honest with you. Muddy Waters, man. You got to give Muddy Waters the credit for everything, because if Muddy Waters doesn't electrify the blues, Elvis Presley doesn't happen. Nobody happens. But Elvis Presley was a product of the society. I mean, he's the white guy that sounded good, that looked good, so he was able to steal from everybody else. The great talents of the time were Little Richard, there were Chuck Berry, and then the great Muddy Waters. Anyway, uh, but I digress. I am Tom, the Whiskey Whisperer, Whiskey Evangelist, prolific whiskey drinker, prayer wisdom, all around good guy, sluncher. And if you still think Elvis Presley was the king of rock and roll, you're just not paying attention.